Welcome to Broad Eye, the podcast that explores knowledge gaps in ophthalmology and eye care. My name is Sean Maloney. I'm the host of this episode, and today I'm virtually sitting with Greg Dubecky. So Greg, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So Greg, you and I have a long history, even though we've never actually met in person. I think we met through I think it was like a forum about retinitis pigmentosa or an email list. If you correct me if I'm wrong, but this is about I don't know what, maybe 13 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. That sound about right?
Yeah, no, it was a long time ago. Yeah, it was right after our son Marty received his diagnosis. Of course, I dove in and started to do some internet searches, and your name came up actually. I think it was something with McGill University. I don't know if it was maybe the Canadian chapter of the foundation. I can't remember what it was, but
I might have written an article or something for them back then. But anyhow, we're here today. We're here now, and so I think we're kindred spirits because of what you wrote in your last email. Is that you're perfect for the podcast because you have a face for radio. So I think we think we share that. So that's a good starting point. But so I wanted to start off hoping that you could talk a little bit about your family history, I guess, and relationship with vision loss. If you want to just share that, a little brief summary of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I'm a 54-year-old guy, man. I just started my 55th year of life, and my wife and I have been married for coming up on 25 years. And my wife, her older brother, he's a couple years older than I am. Both have X-linked retinitis pigmentosa. So what's interesting about that is, my wife is a carrier, but the disease actually manifests itself in her. But it was never back in the day. It was never really a barrier to anything, and we went about our lives. And lo and behold, a few years after we were married, we ended up having our son Marty, and it was a few years into his life that we always kept in the back of our mind, Sean, that there was probably a good chance that that he might inherit something similar to his his mom and his uncle, and we started to notice some telltale signs. And at that time, there really wasn't a retinal specialist in the area that we knew of that we can take him to. So we just took him to a regular ophthalmologist, and long and the short of it is we ended up finding somebody at the Cleveland Clinic, and took Marty in. I think he was probably, at that time he was probably about 4 years old. Took him into a doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, and he diagnosed him as having retinitis pigmentosa. So that kind of started the charge, and we started to dive in and try to figure out as much as we can about this thing. And that's how you and I met virtually. We still got to get together, that's for sure.
There you go. I think we're long overdue for a few dozen beers, I think so. not all at once, but it's interesting you mentioned your wife being a carrier and the disease manifesting in her. I think the stats I've seen on that are something like 2 to 3% of female carriers of X-linked RP, at least to have it fully manifest. And my sister's actually one as well, who only found out a little bit later in life. Like, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa at the age of 5, so very similar to Marty.
Yeah.
And a couple of uncles also that have it. So very similar history there. My mom would be a carrier, but asymptomatic. And my sister is affected. And until, I don't know, maybe my sister would be about 35, give or take. I should know this. She's about 35. And it's only about 8 or 10 years ago that she really started to realize that this is something that is manifesting in her. Mm-hmm. And even, my family had a hard time saying, oh, no, she's just a carrier, she'll be fine. Yeah. And it turns out that wasn't entirely true. But I wanted to just dive into a little bit about having a child diagnosed. So, I mean, that experience in and of itself. So we can maybe go back to what you were saying. You were diagnosed at 4 years old. What were some of the maybe questions, I guess, that you and your wife had at that time? Or was there any direction given by the ophthalmologist at that time? Or you were just kind of saying, hey, here it is. And, because you weren't, I don't know. I mean, how old is Marty now?
Marty's 18.
18. Okay. Well, so you'd still have quite a bit of access, I guess, online back then to some information. But I'm just curious what maybe direction you had, if any, at that time, and if not, what direction you would have liked to have had.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing your story. I'm sorry to hear about your sister. I know how tough that can be, but yeah, with us, our story pretty much started with Marty. You know, we kind of just we look, it is what it is, right? We knew my brother-in-law had RP, and his was progressing. Paula's was not so bad. You know, she was still driving, and even driving at night when we were married. So we didn't think too much of it. We thought, all right, you know what, this is something that we're just going to have to learn to deal with. When Marty was diagnosed, that was probably, well, you can imagine it was about the worst thing that one of the worst things that a parent can hear. And it was, look, we didn't have the greatest experience, Sean, when we received Marty's diagnosis. It was given to us in a way that was matter of fact. So it was myself and Paula, my wife, and her son Marty sitting in the examining chair, and the doc telling us exactly what we kind of already knew. I guess we half expected to be given that diagnosis, not within Marty's earshot. And look, the emotions got the better of us, and we both broke down. It was kind of a weird thing. Marty's a smart kid, even at 4, and we ended up having to explain ourselves away why mom and dad are crying while he's sitting in an examining chair. You know what I mean? So we were a little upset about that. And we got home, and it was just we had the support of family and friends and all that. It was nearly immediately that we jumped in, and you're right, back at that time we had access to the internet, and we started looking around and ended up finding Foundation Fighting Blindness, and found out a little bit more about the fact that it was started by Gordon Gund, who's a Clevelander. And yeah, we jumped right into it. There was nothing that we received. I mean, it was like, look, here's your diagnosis. Here's your son's diagnosis. There isn't anything that we can do about it. The doctor pretty much knew that we understood what having retinitis pigmentosa meant, that it was going to be gradual, loss of vision, starting with night vision and then peripheral vision and acuity and all that kind of stuff. But nothing. We asked for resources. He said, no, there's very little known about this. We don't have much. You can do some internet searches, and that's exactly what we did. So yeah, we felt kind of lost. I imagine it was probably even worse for you, because you're a little bit older than Marty. I know that, and you guys, I think they knew very little about the disease at that point, right?
Yeah. So I'm 38 now.
Oh my God!
I know, just a young pup, eh? So, but it's all relative. So my kids think I'm old. They tell me I'm getting some gray, and I let my beard grow out a little bit. So, right. But no, yeah, exactly. I was diagnosed at 5 years old. It's just an eerily similar story to what you went through. At that time, the doctor literally, I mean, it was a very well-renowned doctor and knew what he was doing, but basically examined my eyes and kind of sat back in his chair and told my parents, looked at them, looked at me, and said, "You're going to be blind." Like, oh, okay. And my mom, same kind of reaction, crying, and like a little bit lost on that. And the same thing. I mean, we weren't diving into the internet back then, didn't have that luxury. I call it a luxury, but maybe it's not a luxury. Sometimes it's there's so much information to sift through. And
Yeah.
I think you hit an important point, right? And I'm sure a lot of people who they themselves or a family member receive a diagnosis. It doesn't have to even be RP. It can be any kind of diagnosis, even outside of ophthalmology. I think you're often kind of sent on your way to try to do a little digging yourself and, some basic information. Sure, there's no cure, not much we
Mm.
can tell you, but as a parent in this case, you want to know some basic things like when, at what age did you really tell Marty or explain to him? And then, how did that, if you remember that at all?
Yeah, no, we started telling him at an early age. So, I mean, obviously at 4, that's just not something that he was able to comprehend. Um, but it was definitely in grade school, when he got a little bit he got a little bit older, I'd say maybe 5th grade, 6th grade, we started to have some conversations with him. And we'd kneel down for prayer time at the end of the day, and he'd pray that he's such a unique kid, man. He would pray for other people, not himself that had retinitis pigmentosa, but other people. And so, yeah, we started to we started to kind of pave the way. um and it was, I don't mean to guide the conversation here, Sean, but it's interesting when you talk about not having access to the internet, and all the whatever information, gathering whatever information you can about the disease. I half wonder whether or not that's even better. That's one of the struggles that my wife and I have. Paula's brother he's lost pretty much all his vision. So he's 50. He just turned 56. Um, I think he can see, some shadows and stuff like that. But he doesn't navigate with a cane. He takes the bus to work in downtown Cleveland. He works as a financial planner, for a larger bank here in town. And he's, throughout his life, he did what I called, crashing through. And I half wonder, whether or not maybe that's better. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just because look, the guy's living a real full life. Um, and we want to offer Marty that too, but at the same time, we feel like as parents, we owe it to him to share with him, ultimately what can come as a result of the disease. That in today's world, even today's world, it still could be a little bit difficult to navigate. And it's not like you lose your sight. You know this, right? It's not like you lose it immediately, and you're forced to adjust, and or that you don't lose. You never had sight to begin with. The human body's pretty resilient. It just reacts. It's almost harder for folks that have a progressive loss of vision, because they know what it's like to have vision, and they know those comforts. And now all of a sudden, as Marty and Paula and Wally have, they lose their vision a little bit quicker. The older they get, they're having to adjust even more quickly. And that makes, it's very difficult to navigate. You know what I mean?
For sure. So, I mean, I've talked with other people offline before, and one of the guys I talked to who is totally blind, who is a phenomenal athlete, competing in the Boston Marathon, hiked Mount Kilimanjaro. One of these, nothing's gonna get in my way kind of guys, and pretty unique. But I remember him commenting to me that going blind was actually harder than being blind. He says when he's finally blind, it's like, okay, I'm totally blind. That's it. It's not like I'm holding on to hope that this is, I can stop it at this level of progression or whatnot. So it's interesting thing to think about, right?
Yeah,
And trying to navigate that as a parent, and trying to help your kid through each stage of that, and trying to understand what they're going through. I know firsthand. I mean, I didn't have any. I don't want to call it emotional support, but I didn't really have a lot of guidance. My parents would do what they could.
yeah,
I had to about Marty's age, probably around the grade 5, grade 6, you'd be around what, 11, 12 years old. And that's when I was starting to really experience some night vision loss and peripheral vision. And I remember playing hockey, and, I'd be the kid to have to put my head down to see the puck. And that didn't pan out too well for me when I was playing full contact. So, I was an okay hockey player, but yeah, it wasn't going to go anywhere when you have to put your head down to see the puck. And I remember playing baseball games, and in the evening games, I'd lose sight of the ball after it got hit. If it goes in the sky, and I'd have to wait until it hit the ground in the outfield to go find it. And obviously that wasn't really helpful for my team. But and then I'm sure that you probably have similar stories there.
Right.
So have you had any guidance along the way at any point in time about how to approach raising a child who has this progressive vision loss, or you as a parent, have you been quote unquote crashing through?
Yeah, it's all just whatever we can read. And then, of course, when we became involved with the foundation fighting blindness, it's a little bit easier to speak to those folks that who either are going through something similar, or their children are affected, and that would give myself somebody to talk to and relate to. But now it's really just been trying to figure it out on our own. And we try not to. I think I may have mentioned, it's like, I'm more of the look, just suck it up, and let's, not to sound crass or insensitive or anything, but it's like, look, man, we're all faced with challenges, and I try to look. I help my son as often as I can. But I try to simulate as close as I can, so long as Marty is safe, the experience that my brother-in-law had. I'll give you an example. I'm a backpacker, and Marty likes to go backpacking too. So we'll hit the Appalachian Trail, and I'll let him lead. And sometimes it's difficult. You don't have that contrast in some parts of the trail. And I'll let him figure it out. And if he makes a mistake, and if I need to correct him before he careens off a ridge, I'll let him know. Try to give him some pointers as best I can. I mean, here's a sighted guy trying to give a visually impaired person some not knowing exactly what he sees, but trying to give him some idea of feel of the terrain, and using your hiking sticks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's always in the back of my mind. When is letting him crash through safe, and when is it not so safe? You know what I mean? So
yeah, and it's tough to navigate. I think that just as an aside, I think I actually once upon a time read a book called Crashing Through that was about a guy who had lost his sight.
that's where I got
okay. Well, there you go. There you go.
The term.
Oh, there you go. His name is Mike something, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the last name, but yeah, there you go. There you go. So I'm not out in left field on that memory, but and again, I can relate on that. And it's tough, and I know from my own experience, sometimes I question how much I should push myself. My wife and I, we like to go running, so we run half marathons together, and we did the one in Vegas last would be the 2019, I guess, November 2019, and you're running at night on the strip. There's some parts of the strip that are well lit up, but the majority of it wasn't. And we said, okay, let's just figure out a way to make this work. So she put on a little wedding dress, because we did the run through wedding vow renewal, which was a little surprise. I wasn't planning that.
Yeah.
She had it surprised me. Then she wrapped her little mini wedding dress in Christmas lights. So I literally just ran behind her for a couple hours in this race, and we figured out a way to make it work. But there's other times where we question, like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. This might be bordering on a safety issue here, right? Versus just, I think there's trying to find that fine line of, let's push you outside of your comfort zone.
Yep.
but not so far out that you're risking any type of serious injury or anything like that. I think it's important to do that. So I think what you're doing with Marty is probably good, because I think that I know from seeing family members, other people I've met who've had different visual impairments, that their world can just become very small. How far they want to go far outside of their house or their neighborhood, to not leaving the house at all. It gets very sad, right? So I think that pushing a little bit is good, but again, there's, like you said, you don't have kind of guidance on that, and it'd be nice to have something. I don't know if an ophthalmologist is the one position to do that, or if there's other groups of individuals. Like you had access to people through the Foundation Fighting Blindness, that maybe the average person's not having access to, but that happened because you did something about your situation as well. You seem to be somebody who takes life by the horns and just kind of, do what you can with it, right?
Yeah, no, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, man, and I'm the run to the litter too. On top of that, so I'm an aggressive little guy.
Well, it serves you well, man.
Well, I've told my wife and kids that I'm like, sometimes I'm not necessarily sure I'm the right person to be coaching you on this, because I would have gone through things a hell of a lot differently than you guys.
But and maybe, like, I know we've been in touch and back and forth with email and talking about some of these questions that come up as a parent, and I don't know whether there are black and white answers on some of the things that we're bringing up here, even other topics that you brought up. When do you inform the schools? When do you inform coaches? When do the kids tell their friends? It's tough, right? Like I remember in high school, we were sitting and taking notes, and I just wouldn't do it because I couldn't see what the teacher was putting up on the on the blackboard. I don't think they use blackboards anymore. In university, I would skip classes in university because I couldn't see what the professor's putting up on the PowerPoint. They were high tech at that time. And okay, I'm wasting my time sitting there. But I also felt like too proud to, take advantage of the note-taking services that the university was offering. Right. And which is, in hindsight, it was a little bit silly because I only hurt myself. And but yet I was very open to tell my friends, and we would go to the bars, and they had great times with me. But I have a few good stories there, but don't have to dive into those.
I read your book, man. I know.
Yeah, that's a book that little things. I think being able to laugh at yourself too. Like I remember so many times, but as an aside, I was at a bar at university, and a buddy of mine says, "Oh, it's your turn to get the picture." So I'm in line to get a pitcher of beer, and the bar's pretty busy, and I'm standing there and waiting, and then he comes over to me about 10 minutes later. He says, "Man, what the hell are you doing?" I said, "Man, I'm waiting in line. The line hasn't moved here at the bar. I'm waiting. It's packed." He says, "Man, you're standing behind a post." Like I thought I was standing behind a person, like just waiting, right? And so then he ended up behind the pitcher of beer, and he felt bad for me, but we laughed it off. Right. I think you have to have a bit of a sense of humor in some of those scenarios. So I wanted to maybe venture into genetic testing a little bit. So has Marty gone through genetic testing?
Yeah, he has. Yeah.
And pros, cons of that, from your opinion?
So, on a selfish note, this is tough. I mean, these are the things that you never really give thought to, Thank God I got a wife who's infinitely smarter than I. The kids got my wife's looks, they got my wife's brains, and unfortunately one of them got my wife's eyes, but they're still far better off, let me tell you. So we on a selfish side, we're happy that we were able to find out exactly what the gene mutation was. So it's X-linked retinitis pigmentosa. The science a lot better than I. I think we share the same, right? You guys, you're affected by X-linked, right?
Is it RPGR?
RPGR, yep.
Yep, same thing. Yep.
Yeah, man, there are so many parallels in our lives because Marty's a runner too, by the way.
I never said I was a good runner, though.
Yeah,
I like to run because I like to drink beer and I need to run so it doesn't show. But yeah, that's about it. And in reality, it's a it's a sport that I can do quite well with my wife too. Like I'm sorry
yeah,
to I don't mean to cut you off here, but I played a lot of sports as a kid, a lot of team sports, and I've always wanted to remain active in my life. And as vision started failing, started crapping out,
yeah,
I had to migrate to some other sports, and running was one that um, came very easily to me, and I can do with a friend or with my wife. With my wife now a lot, and we just run side by side, and you're in an open space, and so even if I veer off one side or another a little bit, it's not that big a deal.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean that's something that even if Marty's vision continues to deteriorate, it's something that you can hold on to, that running for forever, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I apologize for forcing that digression, but so the gene therapy was interesting. Selfishly, we're glad that we did it because of all the science that's out there right now with gene therapy. But I never really realized, until my wife brought it to my attention when we finally received the results of the gene therapy. And we knew definitively, of course, that it was X-linked and that Paula was a carrier. And Sean, there was really no family history whatsoever. I mean, it's really kind of odd that everybody, at least in recent history, those people that we know of on my wife's side, nobody that we knew of, suffered from blindness or anything like that. Um, so when we finally got the report, Paula was, I could tell that she was a little worried, and we started talking about it, and she said, I'm struggling. I don't know. I don't know. We have two daughters as well. Marty's in the middle. Our oldest is 21, and Claire, and Annie is the youngest. She's 16. And then we're faced with the question, all right, what do we tell our daughters? We would hope that they're fortunate enough someday to become married and have children of their own, and we wouldn't want that to get in the way. Same thing with Paula's sister, who has not gone through gene testing or genetic testing, but very well could be a carrier. She had two daughters, and the two daughters, we wouldn't want to affect any decisions that they were to make, in the future. So it was. And I got to tell you, it sounds maybe to the layperson or somebody that's not gone through this type of experiential learning, it sounds, what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal, especially when providing that information to somebody could change the course of their life, right? If somebody decided not to have children because they were afraid they could pass that gene onto their son, or even their daughter, who ultimately could become a carrier. That's that was terribly difficult, and that thought never occurred to me until my wife, explained to me her struggles. So I don't know about you guys, if you've had the same experience or if you guys have gone through any of the genetic testing. That was kind of our experience with it all.
Yeah, so I think that I mean, so many thoughts I can dive into on genetic testing here, but I mean, I think first of all the value of it, right? The value for you, for Marty, in my own case as well, is knowing that mutation, that underlying mutation in the gene that's affected, could allow me to participate in clinical trials. And quite frankly, there's a number of clinical trials that are ongoing now for RPGR,
Yep.
and as it is one of the more common mutations in patients with RP.
Yep.
But so having that knowledge, being armed with that information, would potentially allow a patient to participate in a clinical trial, which is really the benefit of it, or the major benefit of it. but like you said, the drawbacks is like now you've been given powerful information that has potential life-changing impacts for other people in your family circle, right? Like for example, my daughter is a carrier guaranteed. I mean, I only have one X chromosome to pass on to her, so
Yep.
she's a carrier for sure. And my sister being affected, she doesn't know if her daughters are. She has two daughters, so they have a 50% chance each of being of carrying that mutation. So, you know, it's tough, right? And as my daughter ages, and maybe she wants to become a pilot, and I might, should I at that point start thinking, hey, maybe she should be thinking about something that would be a little bit easier to do with vision loss, and in terms of career choices, in terms of a lot of things. So yeah, it's tough, man. It's and again, I don't know. Maybe there are people out there who help help me, help others navigate these conversations with family members. But there's a lot of people who don't want to know. Like I know two people that come to mind that have family histories of, in one case, it's Huntington's, and in other cases, another degenerative condition, and they don't want to know. They don't want to know if they have that underlying mutation, because if they do, they will be affected most likely as they get into that age bracket, let's say 50 plus. They don't want to know, and it's it's tough, right? And I don't know what the answers are in some of these scenarios, but I think it's important for researchers, for ophthalmologists to also recognize that you're elated. Hey, now I know what the underlying mutation is, but there are struggles beyond that. Like you said, there's the negative to that as well, right?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, when we so our saving grace, and to your credit, of course, when you recommended that we went down to that we go down to the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. I don't even know if you remember doing this, but you
I don't know. I don't.
Oh geez. Oh man, I can't remember her name now. She was a genetic counselor there. Delphine.
Okay.
Man, I can't remember her last name. She was really, really unbelievable. She talked us through all the positives, and why this is such a good thing. And then she did make mention at times of certain things we should probably be cognizant of. But she was also a little bit guarded. And that's, of course, when Paula really started to put the two or started to connect the dots a little bit. But yeah, so the genetic counselors, and then we have another one up here, a genetic counselor who's really been she participates in the Cleveland chapter of the Foundation Fighting Blindness, and she's been really great too. Just good, empathetic people that that can shoot straight and tell you the truth, and help you, not necessarily how to raise a kid that's affected with a retinal degenerative disease, but just maybe give you some things that you can think about that you wouldn't have come up with on your own. So
no, that's fair. And I think everybody needs a sounding board, right? For the myriad questions that will come up over time, if you yourself, or you have a child that's affected well, really by any condition. It doesn't have to just be RP, right? I've had people reach out to me. I'm not a doctor, I have a research background and a business background, but I'm not a doctor. And I've had a number of friends or friends of friends reach out to me asking for advice about, oh, what should I do? I had one recently, and then saying, okay, well, do you know what your underlying mutation is? Well, no. Okay, well, then maybe we should try to look at avenues for determining that, because a lot of the therapies right now are gene specific. Yep. And just to try to provide a little bit of guidance. And I know that ophthalmologists don't have the time. They really don't, to sit in and spend, half an hour with each patient. It's just not going to happen. But it'd be nice to have some sort of, I guess, guidelines where I say, okay, here's what you might want to look at. And maybe, and you would know better than I do, with the Foundation Fighting Blindness, maybe that's where they come in and help provide some of that filling in the gaps in information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, they're doing a lot better job at that than they have before. Before it was, all hands on deck, let's raise money. And, they were pretty ambitious with what they wanted to accomplish scientifically. And they did that. And they are beginning to realize, well, I shouldn't say beginning, but they've come to the realization that folks like us, need that resource out there. And then part of the charge of the chapters is really an unintended consequence, of course, is, you basically create a community of people that are going through that same experience, right? So that's invaluable. But then the support given to those folks that are now either just newly receiving a diagnosis, or maybe they're having some vision problems, and they're it's been difficult for them to accept it, and maybe haven't gone to see a doctor, don't know which doctor to go see. That support network that the foundation provides is really pretty invaluable too. So it's all pretty tough. You mentioned something about the career. That's what career do I go into when you're speaking about your daughter, and that's tough too. I know Marty thinks about that. He's a bit reticent, when it comes to speaking about his vision to his friends. Although his friends know, a lot of times they don't get it, just because he can still run, he can still be educated, he can still read a phone, he can still read a book. So they don't, they have a difficult time trying to figure out exactly what he can and can't see. And because Marty doesn't talk a lot about that to his friends, at least, from what I know, I don't know whether or not he's having some of those conversations that I know I had with my friends, which is, boy, I really don't know what the hell it is I want to do for a living, and learning from some of those kids. And then, as a father and a mother, trying to, geez, we all want our kids to be attorneys and doctors, right? Well, you could be whatever the heck it is you want, regardless of any kind of other ability you have, But it would be nice to say, look, these are careers that are a little bit more conducive to somebody that has, a visual impairment. Maybe you should consider those things. I struggle with that too. It's like, I really still wanted to be a rock star and a guitarist. As I look at my picture of Jimi Hendrix sitting in my office here, which he can certainly do with a visual impairment, but I don't know that he's got the chops just yet. But you know what I mean? It's hard as a dad to say, look, you want your kids to be happy, and you want them to, define success for themselves, be it financial success or, anything else. It's so hard. It's so hard to think, look, your kids need to make a living. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to bestow millions on my kids. They're going to have to work, unfortunately. So it's hard to say, look, do something that that's going to be relatively easy for you because your visual impairment. Do something that's going to make you money and make sure that you like it too, right?
It's, so I'm going to go back to, I'm going to give you some very unsolicited advice here. So as a non-expert, but just someone who's kind of been through some of what Marty is going through and will go through. I think that your mindset of kind of crashing through a little bit when it comes to working career is, I don't know if that's the way to go, but that's a little bit what I did, right? I decided when I went into university expecting, okay, I'm going to go into physiotherapy because I liked science, I liked fitness, anatomy, etc. And I thought, okay, as someone with a visual impairment, this is something that I can do. It's very, touch oriented, etc.
Yeah.
And I started working in the therapy clinic at the university and my first couple of years there, and I liked it, but I realized that I have monkey brain, I guess. That'd be a nice way to say like ADHD or something, right? Maybe it's not a nice way. I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I probably have it to some extent. And I'm constantly looking for intellectual stimulation or that next challenge, etc. So probably a little bit more entrepreneurial. And then I decided, you know what? I have vision loss. I like to do unique things. Why don't I try and get into research? Why not? And I get into research, and I had to adapt working in a research lab because I couldn't really do some of the hands-on experiments as well as I would have liked to. But I had other skills, like I wrote very well, for example, and I could really distill down some of the research that was there. So found that my way through doing that, and I ended up also launching an online company and couldn't do a lot of the work because of my vision loss. So it actually forced me to become a better entrepreneur and learn how to delegate because I didn't have a choice. And even I own a business now, a retail business, and I can't do a lot of the hands-on work, but it actually makes me a better owner because I have to empower other people to make decisions. So those are some of the, I guess, positive aspects of vision loss. I hate to say they're positive aspects, but another one. I mean, you said you read my book about my backpacking adventure after university. At that time, the idea was, hey, get a summer job because you're going into a master's program, and you're going to need some money to live on. You're moving to Montreal, get a summer job. And I told my parents, I said, well, listen, my vision is crapping out. I was 23 years old at that time. And I wanted to, do some international travel with friends, and had the opportunity with a buddy of mine to just take off and go. And was willing to put it on my Visa card, which is what I did. And my parents helped out. To their credit, they did help to fund some of that. But at first, they're a little bit resistant, saying, no, and you don't see that well also. And I'm going to be overseas and in Northern Africa and throughout Europe. And in the end, they realized, okay, hey, I'll let them do this. And I was going to do it anyways. I was 23, so they just kind of had to get on board with it. They could either help fund it or not, but but because I think that if I didn't have failing vision, I probably never would have taken that trip at that time. I would tell myself, I forget all the time in the world. I'll do that eventually. And so it's forced me to live life fully and maybe in an accelerated way. Tons of traveling, tons of things that I've done in a relatively short time, I like to think, and just taking advantage of the vision that I had. So there are positive spins that can be put in these things too, right? But,
what a lesson, right? Live in the now. I mean, parents keep telling us that. They've been telling us that forever. Live in the now. Don't worry about the future. And I think we're designed to, for whatever reason, whether or not it's society's influences or what, you always have to be forward thinking, right? Well, with me, I'm a worrywart, man. If I think about the future, for me, it's, I hate to say it. I like to think of myself as a glass half full kind of guy, but I'm not wired that way. I think of the worst. I think that's what helps me with my career and running our operation is, I can always take that. I'm not afraid to look at the bad stuff. I can prepare for it, but to live in the now, man, there's just something to that. And I think that's exactly what you did. And, boy, I see Marty going down that path, which is kind of nice. He's such a cool kid. He's as cool as the other side of the pillow, as I like to say.
Well, like you said, he's got that from your wife, right? So, well, I want to just kind of maybe this is our last closing topic, to circle back a little bit to genetic testing, because I know we've just been back and forth on that a little bit, and over time. Now, when you hear about putative therapies for RP, whether they be molecular therapies or genetic therapies or drug therapies of some kind, do you find it hard to digest the information? And I'll give an example. A friend of mine who is an optometrist, actually, he likes to give analogies to his patients when he's explaining their eye conditions to them. So when he's talking about, they have dry eye syndrome, and he uses the analogy of, think about windshield wipers. Well, sometimes it's the windshield wipers are, not tight against they're too tight against the windshield, and they're kind of creating friction. Well, that's like your eyelid against your eye. And if you don't have enough windshield washer fluid to kind of lubricate the surface, well, then that's when you can have irritation, et cetera, et cetera. So he uses these types of analogies and really seems to connect with his patients. Do you find these analogies anywhere when you're trying to understand RP or some of the therapies that are out there, or do you think that type of thing would be helpful?
Man, no, that would be super helpful. It's rare that you find the doctor with bedside manner, right? They know their science really, really well, but most are incredibly smart and cerebral. And I think it's difficult for a lot of them to really put it in layman's terms. For us, it was, geez, the science moves so fast too. It's, you're drinking from a fire hose, and to try to make sense of the stuff is especially, a lot of the gene therapy. And then I know I mentioned to you once before the CRISPR. It's like, look, I'm not trained in science. I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack. It's difficult for somebody like me to understand what that is. It's important for me to understand what that is, especially with a child that has, quite frankly, maybe an opportunity to take advantage of some of these things. But you want to be an educated consumer, and you want to learn as much as you can, so that you can help, especially an 18-year-old son, help them and guide them into the right decision. I think you alluded to it before, Sean. It's like, look, surround yourself with those people that can help you out. We're fortunate enough to have a family ophthalmologist who's not a retina specialist, but as he says, knows enough to be dangerous about retinitis pigmentosa. What he's learned from Marty and Paula, and he's a super guy, man. He really has the ability to break that stuff down. So he's been a godsend for us, and then the foundation has really just helped out. I think they realize that the science does advance quickly, that it's incredibly challenging to understand, but they do a very good job in what they say and what they write, to help lay folks like us, understand a little bit better. You start to see that, I think, a little bit in hospitals now, just outside of ophthalmology. I had to go to the hospital not too long ago, and they have liaisons. They have these case managers that understand the terminology and can basically interpret what the doctor is saying. So yeah, I think that stuff is super helpful. There should be a heck of a lot more out there. And I don't know, you had mentioned at one point in time that, the podcast, you might use the podcast as a tool for that. That'd be fantastic. I mean, you've explained, you're a scientist, right? And you've explained stuff to us that, or to me especially, that I never would have comprehended before, especially when you were reiterating some of the stuff that your buddy, is it Dr. Young?
Yeah. So Michael Young, he's the retinal stem cell researcher at Harvard. Yeah.
One of the conversations we had, it was incredibly helpful. So
yeah, no, and that's great. I think you as you alluded to there or directly mentioned, the idea behind this podcast is really that is, I think that like many domains, ophthalmology and eye care exists, largely in silos. You have the doctors, you have people who work in industry, you have the, people who work with the foundations that are fundraising or people providing mobility and low vision training and aids. You have the patients, you have the researchers. It's amazing sometimes just the researchers and clinicians are not on the same page about things. They don't understand each other's needs, and nobody has time to listen to the patients. and it's not, and, you know, you can't fault the doctors for it. I have a lot of friends who are clinicians, and, you know, they can see 100 patients in a day. Like, you know, but you as a patient, you can imagine if, oh, are you waiting to see this specialist for 4 months, and then you got to drive 2 hours to get there. Then you're waiting in the waiting room, and then doctor gives you 3 minutes of his time. You're like, man, that guy's a jerk. But, you know, he's trying to rip through 100 patients, and sometimes they come across as not having bedside manner. Some certainly don't. But there are many who do, and they just are not afforded the time to do that, right? So yeah, definitely, I think that the goal of the podcast is exactly that: is to basically have conversations like you and I are having today with the various stakeholders or and entities in the space. I'm fortunate enough to be a jack of all trades in this area and master of none. So, you know, I have a research background in ocular pathology, and I have a lot of friends who are doctors. I'm not a doctor, but I've got a lot of contacts in that space. I've done fundraising and keynote speeches for fundraising events in eye care. I've done, you know, orientation mobility training. Even started a little foundation called Student Vision Canada back in the day that was helping fund raising funds to support students in vision research. Got a number of contacts and friends in industry as well. So I'm well positioned, I think, to have a lot of these conversations. But it's the guests that I bring on that are going to be the bread and butter of the conversations, I guess.
You know, you know what I was going to say, Sean. Anecdotally, it's the medical community is starting to realize that. And here's the reason why. So AGTC is one of the small pharmaceutical companies that has a X-linked RP gene therapy in clinical trials right now. And we've been in contact with them, and they did something that was, you know, above and beyond what the other two that I know of have done. And they had they contacted us and surveyed us to find out what it is, potential families that are affected with this, and potential candidates for the clinical trial. What is it that would make your experience better? You know, so kind of taking that human approach and understanding, hearing the voice of the patient and the families. That was pretty. I was pretty impressed with that. I'd love to see a lot more of that.
And that's for sure. I think that's I feel like we're going that direction in general, right? It's maybe slow, but and then having resources to put all these things in motion. But no, that's definitely interesting. So, Greg, listen, I've taken a lot of your time, and I certainly appreciate you joining me on the podcast. We'll have to do a round 2 at some point. I think we can probably talk for hours. Maybe at some point when this pandemic winds down, we can do this live over a pint or two. That'd be kind of a nice twist on things. So
we can do it virtually over a pint or two also.
That's fair. In the meantime, right? So that the pints don't have to wait. So
hey, I was ready to say at the beginning, Sean, hey, it's 1:30. It's got to be 5 somewhere, right?
fair. And yeah, I got my kids coming home off the bus there shortly, so I need to be in a good state of parenting. So
there you go.
But and which usually involves a glass or two. But anyhow, the red wine is good for your eyes. You know, that's actually funny. I think a good episode to dive into, I don't know what your thoughts are, would be to talk a little bit about diet and health, and some of the information that's peddled out there. Some of it's maybe valuable, some of it's not. So anyhow, I'll keep bouncing ideas off of you. You seem to be full of suggestions. So
all right, man. Yeah, I'm keeping that running list, so I'll let you know.
Perfect, Greg. Thanks so much for joining me.
All right, Sean. Thanks, buddy.
And that concludes today's episode of the Broad Eye Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Of course, ratings and reviews are always welcome. And you can certainly share this episode with any of your colleagues or friends who might enjoy it. Thanks for listening.